Hi guys! As a housewife, I've been able to read a lot of books throughout my pregnancy, so I thought I would condense it down and give you guys my top 3 recommended books for you to read while you are pregnant. My first book, and this would be the book that I would recommend over all other books, is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and this is what it looks like. And I will say quickly, one of the nice things about this book is it is a very popular book. It's very well known, and you can pretty much get it very easily. Like, you can walk into any Barnes & Nobles in the US and just pick it up because they generally stock it. And obviously, like, you could just buy it off of Amazon and get it shipped to your house really quickly. It's pretty easy to get your hands on in general. Basically, this book is divided up into 2. So the first half of the book is just positive labor stories. And this was the very first book I read when I found out I was pregnant, because basically when I got pregnant, I knew that I did not want to read What to Expect When You're Expecting, which is the book that everybody reads, but I've also heard quite a few people say that it has kind of like a lot of negative aspects about pregnancy in it. And I'm all for being realistic and knowing what to expect, but to me, like, being pregnant and going through labor, like, that's a positive experience. It's one of the best things that could ever happen to you in your entire life, in my opinion. So I don't see why people always want to talk negative about it, and I just wanted to fill myself up with positivity, and this book definitely gave me that. A lot of positive mental just ways to make yourself think about pregnancy in a really good way. I did have a little bit of fear about giving birth and everything when I first got pregnant, and I was really easily able to get rid of those fears, just the more research I've done about, our bodies and how we give birth. So this book, like I said, the first half of it is just full of positive labor stories, and it's a good chunk of the book, but each labor story is relatively short. So, you can just read 1 or 2 at a time, or you can read the whole thing straight through. Some of the stories are only like 1 page long. Some of them could be like 4 or 5 pages long. So they do vary in length, and they are told from a natural childbirth standpoint. So these are unmedicated natural childbirths. They're not all necessarily in a home birth format. Some of the women, do have to go to hospital at the end just to deliver their baby safely. And it's just a realistic view of what childbirth is. Most women are able to give natural home birth without any problems. But, Ina May doesn't try to disguise the fact that other things can happen, and it's just about, so that you could expect other things to happen that aren't so positive, but it's not something to fear, and it is something that our bodies are capable of handling. And then the second half of the book is just all about different aspects of the natural birth process, and the big thing is it's all told in an empowering way. So it's not the natural birth process is not explained in a way to make you feel like, oh my God, like, how am I going to do this? It's told in a way to explain, like, our bodies were created to do this. Like, your body was made to birth your baby. Like, your baby is grown to be able to fit out of your body. And that's really important to know and understand, because I think a lot of women really do become very fearful in their pregnancies of going through labor. So for me, invaluable to read. It doesn't matter to me at the end of the day what my actual labor, well, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because of course it matters what my labor experience is, but when I say it doesn't matter like what my labor experience is, what I mean is what's important to me now is the fact that I'm not fearful. Of course, that might change. I'm nearly 35 weeks pregnant. I'm still not fearful. I honestly don't expect myself to become fearful. That could change last minute, of course. but, you know, at the moment, I'm going into labor without any fear. I feel actually really excited about the chance to go through labor, and I definitely think this book was the one that put me into that mental space of really knowing that, like, I can do this. My body's meant to do this. My body was made to do this. There is nothing to be afraid of. And especially because there is nothing to be afraid of. My body was made to do this. And on top of that, in the case, like, you know, in the very slight case that something were to happen, I live in a world where there are, you know, hospitals and doctors that can take care of me in the event that it's necessary. But otherwise, my body can do this. Like, I don't necessarily need them. But in that slight case, I have that to fall back on. Like, everything is in my favor. So there's nothing to fear. Yeah, so Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, that's #1 recommendation. If you were going to just take one book from this, read it. If you haven't already, read it. The second book I read, well, it wasn't the second book I read. This was like definitely not the second book I read. It was probably like the 8th or 9th book I read. But the second book I'm recommending is along the same vein, where it's more to put you in a really good headspace, is Orgasmic Birth, Your Guide to a Safe, Satisfying, and Pleasurable Birth Experience by Elizabeth Davis and Debra Pascali-Bonaro. And you don't have to remember that. I'll write it down below. So this is what this book looks like. And for one thing, let me just say something really quickly. When I read the reviews on these books, one of the things that kept coming up about this book in reviews, like for negative reviews, it was usually just around the fact that they use the word orgasmic. And like, seriously, like, if you're pregnant, you've had sex. Like, can you really not be grown up enough to just like get over the word orgasmic? Like, they're not insinuating that you're having actual sex with your baby. Like, no. It's just the idea that going through labor does not have to be a painful, horrible experience. You know, we've really been conditioned to fear labor. So this book goes more into just the fact that, you know what, if you're really in a good headspace, labor can be enjoyable. And like I said, I am really looking forward to be able to birth my baby. I've heard so many women say that, you know, they wish their husbands could go through it for them, or it's not fair that, you know, women are the ones that have to carry the baby around, and it's not fair that we're the ones that have to give birth. Like, how come guys don't have to deal with this? And it's so funny because I have felt exactly the opposite throughout my pregnancy. Like, I've always felt like I'm incredibly blessed to be able to have this experience. And I've often felt really bad for my husband because I have, you know, a bond with my baby that he doesn't. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he hasn't bonded with our baby, but right now I get to enjoy my baby in ways that he doesn't. Like, you know, he can feel the baby move from outside of me sometimes because, you know, he has to be there. And when he puts his hand on my stomach, the baby has to be moving. But, you know, I get to feel the baby all day. Like, I get to talk to the baby all day. I get to, you know, I'm the one that gets to give it life. And I'm the one that gets to experience labor. Like, he doesn't get to experience labor. And I think that's beautiful that I get to experience labor. I feel quite sorry for him that he doesn't get to experience labor. So, you know, don't look at things negatively. Like, see the positive in it. And once again, I do think reading this book helped me really get to that space where it's like, no, like, I get to do this. Like, this is an amazing opportunity for me. So what this book is like, it's divided into 3 parts. And the first part is how to have an orgasmic birth. Now, obviously, they're saying how to have an orgasmic birth. Like, that's just what they've titled this section. Like, I don't think you can actually guarantee that that will be your experience of labor. And when they say orgasmic birth, like, what they're basically saying is that for some women, the process of birthing their baby is a very enjoyable experience, free from pain. I wouldn't say completely free from pain, but it's just that your view of it is just that you're so focused on the fact that you're enjoying it that the pain is like on the side. Well, that's my interpretation of it, at least. I have this hair that keeps sticking out, and I keep trying to put it behind my ear, and it won't go behind my ear. Well, now it went behind my ear, but watch, it'll pop back out, don't worry. So anyway, yeah, so how to have an orgasmic birth. I mean, it's just really, you know, it goes through different things you can do. Not different things you can do, it just kind of introduces you to the idea of what orgasmic birth is and what that means. Second part of the book is a trimester by trimester guide, is what they're calling it. So, you know, it just tells you, you know, from first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, like different things you can do. And I mean, some of the information is good, some of it is not so good, because, you know, it goes into like dietary advice and stuff like that. Which, you know, you can choose to believe and you can choose not to believe. I don't think it's all bad. But, you know, that part I probably enjoyed less. And then part 3 would be positive labor stories. So just like the Ina May book, this book has just a huge section of one labor story after the other of women who were able to experience birth as something that they really enjoyed, not something that ended up being painful and horrible that they, you know, don't like to reflect on. Now, these are women that love thinking about their birth story, you know, that, you know, wish they could go through it again. And it's just like Ina May's book, like some of them are very short, some of them are a little bit longer. So, you know, you could even, honestly, both of these books I think would be worth the money just if all you wanted to do was read the labor stories. Like, you don't even have to read the rest of the book. Like, because to me, like, one story after the other, after the other, after the other, it's a lot of labor stories in total. It really makes you realize, like, you know what? I can do this. Like, how many women were able to do this? Like, why wouldn't I be able to do this as well? So, those are my, you know, top 2 recommendations. And they're along the same lines for just putting yourself in a positive mental state for labor. But I think that's really important during pregnancy because that's what most women, I think, fear the most. And that's, I think, what a lot of us think about the most. And for me, it's just not been a problem throughout my pregnancy. Like, I haven't worried about giving labor. And I really think it has a lot to do with these 2 books specifically. And then, you know, like, I also watched a lot of videos on YouTube of natural childbirth, just to see it in action and see how these women were responding to their pain. Because even the women that were in pain, like, I still, like, looked at it and I was just like, that seems really tolerable. I mean, even people in your life that will tell you stories about how painful and how horrible, told you it would come back, sorry. Even people in your life that will tell you how horrible their labor was, like, they're still here to tell the story. Like, they're still alive, you know. They just like to be able to tell their story. Like, they need somebody to dump it on. Personally, I'm not a fan of people dumping their horrible labor stories on me, but, you know, don't let it make you get fearful, because, like, people tend to exaggerate a lot, especially when a lot of time has passed. So, you know, people have horrible labor stories and then they go on to get pregnant again and have another baby. Like, our bodies were meant to do this, you know. It's not something to be feared. The last book I read, it was an ebook, so, but it is available in hard copy. It's called The Business of Baby: What Doctors Don't Tell You, What Corporations Try to Sell You, and How to Put Your Baby Before Their Bottom Line. And it's by Jennifer Margulis. And I will say, I have the ebook, but when I looked it up on Amazon, you can still get this book in the UK, but in the US, they only seem to be selling an updated version of the same book. but I'm only going to talk about this book specifically because obviously this is the one I read. I haven't read the updated one. My husband got me this book, so I didn't realize there was a more updated version, or else I probably would have just read the updated version. However, this book is from 2013. It's not old and outdated. So the newer book is from 2015. And from what I can see online, in the US, the newer book is really the one that's easier to get your hands on. Like Amazon isn't even selling the older one. In the UK, Amazon is still selling the older version as well. So if you only want to get the version that I'm talking about specifically, then you can. But in the US, it might be harder. But my understanding is that both books are pretty much the same, just one's updated. So the US version, well, it's not the US version, it's just the more updated version. This hair is called Your Baby, Your Way, Taking Charge of Your Pregnancy, Childbirth, and Parenting Decisions for a Happier, Healthier Family by Jennifer Margulis. And to me, this is a picture of the book, and this is obviously just taken off of Amazon. To me, this was more about just trying to market the book a little bit differently, because the business of baby obviously sounds a bit harsher. It might turn a lot more people off, where the newer naming, Your Baby, Your Way, it sounds a lot more positive and might appeal to a wider audience. So like, I feel like it's pretty much the same book, but that they just kind of retitled it to try to sell more copies. That's, you know, that's my interpretation of it. But anyway, this book to me is really good to read because it goes into very sensitive, controversial topics that you'll deal with throughout your pregnancy and in raising your newborn. Like it's more specifically just in the baby age. It doesn't go in throughout like toddlers and children and teenagers. So, but it's important to read while you're pregnant, because these are things, some of these things will come up while you're pregnant, and then the other things are going to come up like right away after you have your baby. Like it's not something that you want to wait to read after you have your baby. And I think it's really important to read about these sensitive, controversial topics. These are a lot of topics that people don't even want to like think about or consider. They just want to do what everyone else is doing and not even question it. To me, whether or not you agree with her, like, I don't want to say I don't care, because that's not really true, but, you know, that's not the point. The point is to at least get a different viewpoint on a lot of these topics, and then you can make your own decision. Like, do what you feel comfortable with, but at least do the research. Like, don't just be a sheep, you know? Like, so this book, like, some of the things it'll talk about is it goes into ultrasounds, what I will call pressured C-sections, or just the overuse of C-sections, because yes, absolutely, sometimes C-sections are necessary, but they are really, really overused as a convenience thing, which the book can go into. It talks about circumcision, you know, baby formula, over breastfeeding, diapers and vaccinations, like just really sensitive, controversial topics that people don't like looking into. And, you know, it goes into like really good detail. Like you get a really good chapter on each topic, very well researched, cited sources, which I find very important, because one of my biggest gripes about a lot of these books that I've been reading is not all of them are well cited. And if a book isn't well cited, then it's, you know, you could write an entire book and it could say like really great things, but if you're not citing your sources, then it's like me talking to my camera on YouTube. Like, I'm just talking, like I'm just giving you my opinion. A book that's not cited, it's just somebody giving me their opinions. Like, there's nothing to back it up. This book is really well cited. And I think really thoroughly researched, and it gives you a good starting point. for what you might want to research further. Some of these things you might feel like it's enough for you to make a decision on what you would want to do in either way. But other things you might be like, oh wow, I never even considered that. I want to look into this more. And there is a wealth of information out there on each of these topics. So, you know, it's just a good, you know, instead of like recommending a source for each of these topics, like this is like a really good book to read to like just introduce you in general to a lot of them and just what are the issues that go behind them. Like why would some of us be against some of these issues? The only thing this book talks about that I would maybe recommend skipping while you're pregnant is the ultrasound section. And that would just be in the event that you've already been pregnant for a while. By the time you're seeing me recommend this book, you've already had ultrasounds. I wouldn't even read it because at the end of the day, you're probably absolutely most likely going to have a beautiful, healthy baby, and there's no reason to cause undue stress throughout your pregnancy. That being said, if you just found out you were pregnant and you're really excited and you've come across this video somehow and you haven't had your ultrasounds yet, get this book, read this chapter, and then do further research if you want to or don't, but I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to scare anybody. But I think, because to me, I think a lot of people know this information and they still choose to get ultrasounds done anyway, and that's fine. But you know, I think everyone knows, like, I haven't had any ultrasounds done. I'm not 100% against ultrasounds though. Like, I will make that very clear. Like, I'm personally only against the routine use of ultrasounds. Like, I would certainly go in and get an ultrasound done if there was something that really worried me about my baby specifically, that I felt, not the doctors feel so much, that I felt needed an ultrasound to, you know, let me know things were okay. And I say not the doctors because they'll pressure you to get ultrasounds for little things sometimes. Yeah, so I would skip that if you've already had lots of ultrasounds done, unless, like, you know, if you're somebody who knows that it won't worry you and you just are interested, go ahead and read it. But in general, I wouldn't read that section. Everything else is more later on in pregnancy. There is like a section about prenatal care as well. That's perfectly fine to read, like, even if you've already had your prenatal care. Like, well, obviously if you're still pregnant then you haven't finished it, but there's nothing worrisome about that section of the book. But most of the rest of the book is more like for right after baby comes, but it's right after baby comes, so like read it while you're pregnant. Don't wait till you've had your baby to read this book. Yeah, so those are the 3 books I recommend. Like I said, I will write their titles in the description bar, so you don't have to like remember to write it down. It'll be right there. And that's it. So I hope somebody found this helpful. And like I said, like, these to me, like, were really important in my pregnancy to me, because these are the books I think that really helped me the most and, you know, helped to put me in a really positive mental state throughout my pregnancy. So I couldn't put a price on that. Like, that's invaluable. So I hope that it will help you guys out as well. And number 1 recommendation, if you were only going to read one book, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Read it. It's great. It's old. Well, it's updated, but, you know, a lot of people feel like it's hippy dippy. Birth doesn't change. I don't care, like, if the pictures are from the 70s. We're giving birth the same way today as we were back then. That was like one of the biggest complaints about this book, that pictures were from the 70s. Like, I'm sorry, in the 1970s, nipples looked just the same as they do today. Get over it. So yeah, have a good day, guys, and read these books. Bye.